Today I'm going to be walking you through 5 tips for working with your pointed pen. So I just have a few things that I've already kind of talked about some of them, but we're going to go over them. I'm going to answer some additional questions that a few of you had just to help you as you're actually using your pointed pen. So let's jump in. So the very first tip is your grip and how you're actually holding the pen. So I like to hold it about an inch to an inch and a half above this point is where you're going to hold on to it. And one of the questions that I had was how to actually put your fingers on it. And we're not changing the way that you would normally write. So for example, when I grip a normal pen, I hold this the same way where I'm resting it on my third finger and I'm using my pointer finger and thumb as supports. But a lot of people will go down to their ring finger as the main one they're holding on to. So I don't want to change the way that you normally write. I think however you normally hold a normal pen and then switch back to this, and you're going to want to hold it the exact same way. You're about an inch above this is where you want your fingers to be. The other thing with grip is that you don't want to be having a death grip where you're like squeezing super hard on this, mostly just because it makes your hand tired. So if I were to walk behind you, I should easily be able to pull it out of your hand. You should have a light grip as you're holding it. Okay, the next point is angle. So you want to keep the nib about 45 degrees from this nib down to the paper. And I'm going to see if I can get a better angle on my camera. Okay, so the 45-degree angle that we're talking about is right here, this angle. So from where your nib is to the flatness of the paper, that should be about 45 degrees how you're holding it. It may be a little bit lower at times or a little bit higher at times, and that's okay. But generally, you want to stay in this 45-degree angle range. Another question I got asked was, what angle should your nib be in the holder? So if you are right-handed, like myself, then you would want the nib going in this direction. Okay, so it's pointing to the right. And if you're left-handed, it would flip. You'd flip it over this way and you'd put it in this way. So it would be pointing to the left. So it's not really, I guess if you look at it this way when you're putting it in, you want it to kind of line up with this. So the flatness of the nib is also like parallel with the holder, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. Yeah, so you want it to be kind of parallel. And then you just push it all the way in, and then you're ready to start. So this next tip is just making sure that the vent has ink in it. So you could see that I have it in, and as the ink is kind of spreading down, it doesn't have it anymore. But you just want, if there's ink in the vent, then it's going to flow down to the tip. And so when there's not any more, then I'm just going to dip again. And I usually, I'll just continue to do that. So as I'm drawing, you can go a little bit farther than when it's totally gone, and then I'll just dip again. So you're just gonna have to get used to that cadence a little bit of constantly kind of re-dipping to get more ink onto your nib. The next tip is all about pressure. So anytime you're gonna be moving your pen in a downward direction, you're going to want to use a heavy pressure. So that's gonna be your thick lines. And anytime you're moving up, you're going to want to be using light pressure, so that's going to be your thin lines. And that's going to give you that classic calligraphy look where you have thin and thick lines in your letters. And the last tip is just movement, that we don't just want to be moving only our wrists. You want to be moving your whole arm as you're drawing, and that's just going to be giving you more control if you're moving your whole arm versus just little tiny wrist movements. One additional tip that I'm going to share is, this was a question we had with the very first workshop, but something will happen if you press too hard, all the ink will just go down to the bottom. Can you see that? Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so if I'm using too much pressure, you're going to be able to see I can press down and you can see all the ink already went down to the bottom, and eventually it's just going to run out. And what's happening here is I'm using too much pressure, and that is what's causing that. So if I use less pressure, I'm still using pressure to get a nice downstroke, but I'm not using so much that the tines totally open and all the ink comes totally out. So you just want to find a nice balance of using pressure, but not using so much pressure that all the ink totally comes out of the nib.